Yeah, basically we just kind of let it flow. We don't edit anything unless you tell us, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that on a
Right?
recording."
Yeah.
Um,
There shouldn't be any of that unless maybe there might be a four-letter word here or there that
Oh,
might
those are
slip
Yeah,
out.
fine.
it's okay.
those are
Those are
fine.
fine.
Okay, cool.
Unless you don't let it out there that you
I
said it.
I could
Yeah.
easily get beeped a time or two, but
No,
anyway,
all of our listeners are told they need to be 21 plus. So
Yeah, it's only
good
about
deal.
whiskey, so if you're under 21 listening to us, you shouldn't be. Or 18.
Right?
Or
Right?
21, whatever state you're in. We're close to Wisconsin, so age doesn't matter, really.
Yeah.
Oh no.
A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters. Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
I'm Dan.
and I'm Gold Eagle Jake. And today we have a very special guest joining us from down in Texas, Marlene Holmes, who is the
Hi there.
master distiller. Welcome, Marlene.
Thanks. Hello.
Yeah. She's the master distiller of Milam Greene. She's been in this industry for a pretty long time, has a very impressive track record. Was named the 2024 Master Distiller of the Year by the Bourbon Women's Group down in Louisville. And in 2025, she was inducted into the Whiskey Magazine Hall of Fame. So some pretty impressive recent accolades there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just let the whiskey speak for itself, though.
Which
How
it
about
does.
that?
Which it does. So we had the pleasure of hosting Marlene at the store for a master class a couple months, maybe about a month ago, and it was one of the better presentations we've had. Your knowledge was incredible. Your storytelling was incredible. And right after, I was like, we got to get you on the podcast. So thank you for making the time. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, thanks for having me. This is a great platform for us, to be able to chat with people that love whiskey and like to talk about it and drink it. And so it's a good platform for us to be able to, to get the word out there about us, who we are, and can't help you on the part of the tasting side of it, but then you'll just have to go to Gold Eagle or your nearest someplace and pick up a bottle of it.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll give out a coupon code for the listeners, but not just yet. We gotta
Great.
And
gotta get him
Marlene,
into
he
the
also
whiskey.
ships to 40 states, so
Mm-hmm.
even for people that aren't
Yeah.
local to his store, he's got a pretty big network he can get people
Yeah.
whiskey to.
So that's a great point. 19 states. We're in 19 states physically, but can be shipped through a third party. Yes.
Yes,
Just
I can
about
help
anywhere
you.
in the United States. Yeah.
If you're in one of the other ones.
Yeah.
So obviously we're going to be talking a lot about Milam Greene this episode. There's a ton of interesting things to discuss there, but I know you have a pretty impressive track record before Milam Greene. Why don't you just kind of go into your background, how you got into this industry, what you did working for Jim Beam, and then how you eventually got in contact with Milam Greene to become their master distiller.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a fish story involved there with, getting my foot in the door there at Beam. And, just to give you a little bit of the short version of that is how I got into the business. Had a small farm there in Kentucky with a small lake. Thought about getting into the catfish business, literally becoming a catfish farmer. And was told that there was a guy down at the local Jim Beam Boston plant that was doing an experiment with spent stillage. So, the spent stillage is that byproduct you've got left over. It's great livestock feed. He was thinking, this dude loved to fish. And so he thought, well, maybe fish. We could turn it into fish food also. So he was running a project on that spent stillage. And so I was encouraged to go meet him and chat with him about the experiment he was running, and that guy happened to be Booker No, and the sixth generation master distiller there at Jim Beam, and big old burly guy, about 6'2", 300 pounds, big old fella, loved to eat and loved to fish, and he loved whiskey. And so him and I chatted. We had lunch. We ate a burger, and chatted about catfish and spent stillage and fishing mainly. And he asked me to help with his experiment. He told me, he said, I need somebody to feed these fish each day for me, and would you be willing to do that? And so I volunteered to go down each afternoon and feed the 1,000 catfish fingerlings that this dude had in a little chill pond there on the property. And so that was my introduction, into the facility. Before that, I'd never been on a distillery tour, been inside, a distillery, and just was very curious about the equipment, the big silos, the rick houses, the column stills, all that kind of stuff, really kind of fascinated me. And so the more, every day I'd go out there and chat with some of the employees that were there on second shift in the evenings. And hell, one of them would be grilling out, cooking, something on a grill. Had this one dude, it seemed like every time I saw him, he had a beer in his hand. And I was like, and they were like, the guard told me, he said, don't worry about that dude. That's his lunch. That's what he brings for lunch every day is a 6-pack of beer. So, that was years ago. That was 1990. Times have really changed since then.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's just the culture, the equipment, the laid backness about it. Just really was intrigued about it. And that fall, they hired a lot of people. The 80s, 70s, and 80s wasn't real nice. Wasn't a good time for whiskey, brown spirits. And so they were starting to hire there at Beam. I think a lot of distilleries started to pick up there in the early 90s. So, they were hiring. I applied, and they hired me. So I didn't become a catfish farmer. And I don't know what the hell happened to Booker's catfish, his experiment with that spent stillage. I mean, to my knowledge, nothing ever become of that either. But it was a pretty neat opportunity for me to get an inside look, at the distillery and make the decision to jump in with both feet. So I started out rolling barrels. Did that for about 6 months. And when I talk about rolling barrels, it was either putting new barrels, new entry barrels into the rick houses, or taking regage or aged whiskey out, to be dumped. So I did that for about 6 months. And I really beefed up during that time handling those barrels. It was pretty physical work. But then had the opportunity then to go into the still house. And worked in the distillery then on third shift. Had the graveyard shift for 10 years then. I would go in at midnight and get off at 8 in the morning. And so I did that for 10 years and learned to run the column stills, the cookers, fermentation, the refrigeration part of the operation, the grain side of things, the grain mills. And and was always asking questions. Why this and what's that? And took a lot of notes. And just fell in love with the environment and the opportunity, to be able to make something from something that you grow. As a kid, I grew up with cornfields all around. We lived out in the country. We was on a 1,000-acre farm and cornfields all around. And so it was pretty cool, to see that crop, something that you grow, to turn it into something as neat as and unique as whiskey that people love, to enjoy. And so, that was 1990. Stayed there until 2018 when I had the good fortune to meet Marcia Milam. Now, Marcia is our founder. She founded our distillery, Milam Greene, in 2017. and she was in 2018. She was looking for a distiller, and just so happened a guy that she'd been working with was our maintenance manager at Boston there at the bean plant, Randy Allender. He'd been there for 30 some years, and just a wonderful person, but he was consulting with a lot of craft distilleries, and so that's how him and Marcia connected with one another. So he was my connection to her. And so she called me, and I flew into Austin, first time into Austin, and stayed the weekend, visited the distillery, got to go to the very first Texas Whiskey Festival. So the timing was pretty cool on that. And got to drink a lot of whiskey there on a Saturday night and listen to some great music. Oh my God, Ray Benson and Asleep at the Wheel played at the festival, and it was just like, I was in heaven. I was. And so Marcia offered me the opportunity to come down and be the head distiller for her, and so I put a for sale sign on out front yard there of the farm, packed my bags, and off to Texas I moved. So that was 8 years ago. And so, yeah, I've been here, and we've grown in leaps and bounds here at Milam Greene. We've more than tripled our production of what we make here in Blanco. As a matter of fact, I live in Blanco. I'm 5 minutes from the distillery. But we've got a real cool little place. Yeah, Blanco's a neat, man. I mean, it's a really neat little rural community, and we're a part of that. And we've got a really neat little distillery, a cool tasting room where you can come in and have some of the best cocktails you're going to have any place, or do a whiskey flight, big oak tree to sit under and listen to some good music. So yeah, I'm pretty
Very
lucky.
nice.
I feel like
So-
very, very fortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds you were at Beam for it sounds like 28 years.
28 years.
28
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And I remember
Yeah.
you saying at the masterclass, you obviously moved on from that graveyard shift and up into a little bit bigger of a role. I think you might have mentioned on the, corporate back end side a little bit. Or am I off?
Yeah, no, I was pretty much in operations the whole time
Okay.
I was there. Yeah, I was pretty
So-
much in operations the whole time.
I guess
Yeah.
my question is you had like a very big position for Jim Beam, which is one of the biggest distilleries in the world. That's a big move to just sell your property and move down to Texas and kind of start fresh with a brand, which at the time nobody really knew who Milam and Greene was.
Yeah, right.
What was like the biggest factor that made you say, you know what, I'm ready to kind of take on this new project and take lead and take charge here?
Yeah, the biggest thing actually was, for a few years, that was 2018 when I made that move, and actually a couple of 3 years before, even before that, I had the thoughts that, it would be pretty cool to work with a craft distillery. At that time, in the 2000s, early 2000s, 2010, I mean, the distilleries were just popping up all over the place. And I always was intrigued too about, on the craft side of it. At Beam was very much hands-on back in 1990 when I started there. It was very hands-on, and over the years with automation and the expansions that we did, a lot of that changed. And and I realize that's the times that we're in, is automation and what have you. And that was cool to see that transition from the hands-on to more of a controlled environment as far as computers and what have you, and the automation. But is what I just thought. I was 62 years old at the time when Marcia offered me the opportunity, and that's not that old. Not really. I can say that because I'm older than that now. But that's not that old, but I still at the same time I thought, seems like a really cool opportunity. I mean, I did my homework. I've or did my research about hill country and Blanco and uh, Marcia and a few other things, of people that were involved in our operation, and just had a real good feeling about it. And I just felt good, got good vibes. I come out to the distillery, and it was on a Saturday. They was running the pot still. Was able to taste some of the new make, the distillate coming off the still that day, and what they had already captured, a few batches of it in a tote that they had, that they were getting ready to barrel up. So and it didn't taste like any white dog I had tasted before. It really didn't, but it was totally different than any white dog too. At the same time, it was a sweet mash. We malt our rye. We use a couple of different yeast strains. So, there were a lot of things very different about the white dog here than the white dog that I had been used to tasting for 27, 28 years there in Kentucky. And I just got good vibes about it. And I thought, if you don't take this chance, might not have another one. So, I took that leap of faith. And and it worked out.
So dude, I just kind of looking at the picture here. Looks like you guys got a 500-gallon Vendome that you guys use, and then is it like a 200 for second pass?
Well, actually, it's a 300.
300,
The
okay.
smaller one's 300, and then the bigger one is 1,000 gallons.
Oh, it is 1,000. Wow, okay.
1,000 gallons, yeah. So, we've got a pretty bare bones operation. I wish I was there. We had that little glitch this afternoon, and it kind of screwed things up. But so we started out, when I first come down here, we were making like 1.8 barrels of whiskey a week. And my older brother, he told me, he says, so, when I decided to take the job and told the family that I was moving to Texas, my older brother asked me, he said, so tell me a little bit about that. At that time, it was Ben Milam, actually. It was Ben Milam Distillery, Ben Milam Whiskey. He said, tell me a little bit about that Ben Milam Distillery, how big of an operation is that? So I said, well, to give you the concept of size, I said at Beam right now, we're making about 1,400 barrels a day. When I left, we had 2-column stills that we were running 280 gallons a minute, 7 days a week. And so down here, 300-gallon pot still, 1.8 barrels. And he just shook his head, and he's like, girl, you're crazy. He said, are you sure, you want to do that? And I said, yeah, I've got a good feeling about it. I'm going to go for it. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's one thing I've learned. So the little bit of time I was a distiller, I hate the heat. And I tell you what, the one thing I learned quickly is I would not be able to distill down in Texas.
Yeah.
When we get a hot Illinois day, I'm sitting in the office as much as possible dying.
Right. Yeah, it's very humid there. Like when I was there with you there in Chicago back last month, that first day I got there, when I walked out of the airport, I was like, holy cow, welcome back to the Midwest. That humidity, I mean, you could cut it with a butter knife, and and in Kentucky, it gets very humid down there, but, we make it work and drink a lot of water, and so we make it work, but the heat is something else. But, and the elements, I mean, my God, I can remember there, at Beam, the winter time. I could deal with the heat far better than I could the winter months. And so to me, that's a trade-off.
See, I'd rather be out chipping ice off of the tower cooler than in the distillery when it's 89 and humid. So
yeah, me and Dan both like a nice 55-degree day.
Yeah,
right. Nothing wrong with that.
I'll take 0 over 90 every day of the week, and it got up to 90 here yesterday in Utah. I'm like,
and now that I think about it, Whiskey Acres, I met some of the folks from there.
Probably Jamie, Nick, or Rob.
Oh,
Those
man,
would be the big
names.
three.
I'm horrible with names. I really am.
Nick's a little bit shorter, bald, talks a lot. Jamie's Rob's about my age.
I would recognize their face, but it's just the name of the distillery. It seems like I ran into somebody there. We was at the Benny's event. That's when I was down, and I talked to several people, but it seems like I'm pretty sure that I chatted and probably even had a little drink of whiskey with them. Truth be known,
I was gonna say, just looking at the few photos I've seen of the actual distillery online, it looks very similar. Pretty bare bones. They use a 500-gallon Vendome. So a lot of the equipment looks super familiar with what I'm used to.
Right. So. Now, we've not only got those pot stills here that we operate, but now I go back to Kentucky and we work with the people there in Bardstown. So we've got our contract whiskey that we work with those folks there. And that's, they didn't tell us what they could make for us. We told them what we wanted them to make. So it is a custom mash bill. And I go in with those guys, work with them, taste the distillate, coming off the doubler, and stick my finger in as many fermenters as I possibly can. And I just love hanging out in that environment. I do. It's just, it's endless to me. They've got those open top fermenters. And so me and one of the guys was standing there one day, and this big clump of fermented grain just kind of bobs up to the top and rolls over. And I was like, holy cow, all these years I've never seen that happen. And the guy with me, he had worked with me actually at Beam, and he said, well, think about it, Marlene, we had closed top fermenters there, so unless you stood there with a flashlight looking inside that man head, you wouldn't see, all that activity. And to me, it's just fascinating. I mean, it's my favorite place of the distillery is the fermenter house. I love it.
So obviously especially over the last 15, 20 years, there's been a big rise of Texas whiskeys. Down in Texas, do you guys still have to fight a lot against that it can be bourbon and not from Kentucky? Like, are you guys have a strong enough foothold in the state that people know that Texas can make bourbon too, or do you still have to fight the constant battle that good bourbon only comes out of Kentucky? Oop. I think we lost audio.
Lose you?
Yep. Yeah, there you go. There you are.
Okay. I got a quick I wonder what that button was for. There we go. But, yes, we are. We do still fight that battle. But that's okay. We didn't expect not to. They've been around over 200 years, some of them, 250 years, damn near it. And it is new. The oldest distillery here is like 18, 19 years old, I think, 20 years old maybe. But the thing of it is there's good whiskey being made down here. It really is. It's a totally different environment, to run fermentation and all that in, and the aging process and all that. It's a totally different animal. But there's some good whiskey coming out of Texas, and I think we're one of the prime examples of that. Today we had a group into the distillery, and we thieved some whiskey out of a barrel that was we barreled it up in December of 2018, so it's just a little bit shy of 8 years old, and it's the color on it is fantastic. I mean, the color is like crazy, and the taste, the sweet notes, the caramel, a little bit of spice there on it is so nice. So we do continue that battle. Most of them have bigger budgets than we do, so you're not just up against volume whiskey wise. You're up against the whole gambit of marketing and all that kind of stuff. So there again, that goes back, to you guys and the opportunity that you all offer in the platform. It means a lot to us. It really does. Yeah.
If expand on that a little bit. there's also this conception that Texas whiskey is very like over oaked.
Exactly where I was going.
Like super, super dark and, can only be aged for like 3 or 4 years before it turns bad. I don't think a lot of people realize, how expansive Texas is and how much climate variation there is. So, if you want to touch on that real quick too.
So, and that's a great question because, like I said, it's a whole different environment. So there's things that you can do. Like, in Kentucky, there's a lot of things that are just really standard. You go in the barrel at 125 proof. You use a 4-char. You got that 53 gallon. A lot of those things are very similar amongst all those distilleries up there, those legacy brand distilleries. Very little of that holds true with us. And I think that's one thing that makes us so unique. We do use the 53 gallon barrels, but we don't use any char 4. We use primarily 3 and even some 2s. Our barrel entry proof, we've dropped that down. And we did these things right off the bat because, we realized that the heat was going to have such a tremendous influence on that finished product that we had to make those tweaks pretty quick on. I can remember like the first barrel sample I pulled with being down here just 2 or 3 months of whiskey that we had made, some of the first barrels we had made, which at that time would have been just a little over a year old. The color, when I saw the color of it, I was like, holy cow, this is not like 14-month-old whiskey back home in Kentucky. This is not what it looks like. Now, I can't say much for the taste of it at that point in time, but I could see the significance in the difference of the color. So that's why we made that change pretty quick on going to char 3, char 2s. And the little barrels, you've got some of the distilleries down here that use like the little 15 and 20 gallon barrels. And I think that's where maybe you might get a lot of that oaky, woody, because it just accelerates, the aging process in those barrels. And we just elect not to do that. We spend a little more money to do things differently. But as a result of that, we've got really, really good whiskey. So, yeah, there's some whiskey down here that's pretty aggressive. I mean, it just is. It's bold and aggressive. That's the best way I know how to put it. And, and that's a palate for some folks. That's what some folks enjoy drinking. Not me. I'm on the sweet side of things.
So you mentioned you guys had to make a couple tweaks and changes and lower the entry proof. When you got on board with Milam, how far along were they? Were they still experimenting, or had they already started, their true distillation runs? And what impact did you have on making those changes?
Yeah. So those things I tweaked those things. Is what we did have is when I come down here, we had our mash bill. We had that squared away, and that was at 70% corn, 22% malted rye, 8% malted barley, and 2 different yeast strains. The guys were working. There was a brewer and a distiller that had worked about a year together with one another, and so they had that mash bill pretty much, the way that they wanted it, and they were tinkering around with the yeast strains just when I come in, but they had that pretty much determined also. And so when Marcia hired me, she said, we've got the blessing of, people in the whiskey business. She would take those samples to people and have them try the new make. And, she got a thumbs up from several of them. Randy Allender was one of them. He was, the guy that was consulting with her. They were having some issues with the still. And so that's why he originally come in and was working with them. And he tasted the new make coming off the stills, and he said, yeah, that's pretty good stuff. And so she told me, she said, don't change anything about, what we've got so far. And I told her, I said, that's fine by me, but what I did tweak was the barrels, the char levels on the barrel. Right off the bat, we went to within a month or two, we went to 110 proof and 115 proof on our distillate going in the barrel. So I did two different proofs so we could compare them. And we did a variety of different charred barrels. We did several things like that, but they did that once I come on board, and then a big thing influence that I had too was the expansion that we underwent, bringing in the 1,000-gallon pot. We were doing everything in one building. Everything was under one roof.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from grain handling, fermentation, bottling, aging the whiskey. Everything was under one roof. So we quickly built a rick house within the first 2 or 3 months I was there. Our chill system wasn't quite what it needed to be, and that's a huge factor on fermentation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's where it starts. If you screw up that fermentation, you're not going to put good whiskey in a barrel. And so we were really struggling with our chill system, so we upgraded that, and we even upgraded it a third time through the expansion. But so that was mainly my influence, was to just grow the business. Expanded the tasting room. We had barrels sitting in our tasting room with like a countertop on top. And it was cool looking, but it was our office, me and the brewer, our office was the same size as the tasting room. And so I was sitting there with one of the investors one day, and I told him, I said, we don't need an office that big. I said, take that wall out, expand this tasting room, and instead of fitting 20 or 25 people in here, you can almost double that capacity of people being able to. And that's, that I knew the bourbon tourism side of things from Kentucky.
Yeah.
And, how important that is. And so that day, Mike come out and he got me and he said, hey, come here, I've got somebody I want you to meet. And so it was a local guy, and he says, this guy's going to remodel our tasting room for us. So within a month's time, we expanded that tasting room, and then we've expanded that a third time beyond that. So that's where my influence was making whiskey, putting really great whiskey in a barrel, and then just helping grow things, just to grow the business, grow the brand.
Yeah, it's awesome. We talk all the time about how important bourbon tourism is, and you need to get people into the distillery to really fall in love with the brand and support the brand as well.
Right.
So I think one thing that I want to touch on a little bit more, because I feel like people don't really understand what malted rye is and what exactly it does. Had you ever worked with malted rye before, Milam? And can you touch on what it does to the flavor profile in the body of the whiskey?
Yeah, it's pretty significant difference. I had never worked with it before, but is what it does. It softens up, so to speak, that grain. I've had the opportunity to take that raw malted rye and just chew on it, and it has a real nuttiness, a real chocolate note that'll come out of it. Really, really nice. And so the brewer we had at the time actually was the one that suggested malted rye. And so that was, part of that original recipe that we used. But, it's just like malting the barley side of things. It just opens that kernel up. That cereal opens it up and gives you more of the flavor. And to my knowledge, I know there's a few distilleries around now that are using malted rye, but the majority of them use raw rye. It's more expensive.
I think there's more rye whiskeys using malted rye than bourbons.
Right.
And
right.
even then, there's not a ton.
Yeah,
and
a handful,
from
maybe.
a store perspective, I feel anytime there's a malted rye that comes out, people really, really dig it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the influence on the final product is tremendous. I mean, it really is. Our new make coming off of our still, to give you an example, like 3 weeks ago, we had the Texas Whiskey Festival. And one of the classes they had during the Whiskey Festival was for some of the distilleries to bring in their new make distillate for people to try. So you could bring it in off of, if you run a pot still, or you could bring it in if you run it off of a column still. And so we had both. We had our Kentucky distillate and the Texas distillate, both. And then there was 3 or 4 other distilleries that was on that panel. I was part of the panel, and there was a few other guys that was on there. And so we had the opportunity to taste that new make. And I tell you what, guys, again, I'm not just saying this, but that new make of ours, that sweet mash, it's just, hands down was the best new make of any of them. I mean, there was no freaking comparison. It was that good. So that's part of that. That's part of that barley, that malted barley. It's also part of the 2 different yeast strains that we mingle together. So yeah.
Super nerdy question. I've never worked with malted rye. Do you also get some enzymatic activity out of that, like you do out of barley for the?
Yeah. You will some, but we don't drop ours in until it's starting to come down. On that, on that chill side. And there's some there, but it's more, I've just always looked at rye as more of a flavoring compound, or not a compound, but a flavoring cereal that you throw in there, to really give it some nice flavors. And so, with that sweet mash and that malted barley is really, really nice. It's like cream of wheat when you get it cooked up in the mash cooker. I mean, it is really, really good stuff.
Marlene, so obviously you've been in the industry for quite a long time. Just fairly recently, we've seen a lot bigger explosion of prominent women in the industry, with people like Nancy Fraley, Elizabeth McCall is big at Buffalo Trace now. As you were coming up through, did you find it difficult being someone getting bigger and bigger in whiskey and predominantly a male industry at the time, or was everyone pretty open to the change?
The majority of people were pretty open. There's always been women there. I mean, there just has. They just haven't been in those roles of leadership. And that's unfortunate because, I worked with 2 ladies that were just, I mean, they were like, as far as I'm concerned, my generation. And I shouldn't say that because hell, they're not quite as old as I am, but they're pretty darn close. But that was Pam Heidelman and Victoria Samuels. Those women were right there. Those ladies. I mean, Pam was our distillery manager there through the late 90s through until about 2015 before she moved on to Michter's. And then Victoria, my goodness, she was lab manager for many years, relief supervisor, and then went on to work over at Maker's Mark and was the production manager at Maker's Mark. So, but it's like the women haven't been in those positions to where they get a lot of recognition. And they just kind of keep their head down and do, what needs to be done. And I've kind of been that way too. I just do what I know to do it to the best of my ability. And, I'm not loud about it. I just go about my business and then, get to chat with folks like you guys. And share it a little bit. But, you know, there was always people that were there that were supportive. But believe me, you know, there would be times I'd scratch my head and I'd be like, holy cow, people, this is the 1990s. You know, shit. We're not in the 50s and 60s anymore. Just get with it, you know. Like, to give you an example was, you know, Beam makes their own jug yeast. They're one of very few distilleries that actually create and make their own yeast strain. And it's an old yeast strain, been around, you know, forever. And so originally, early on, I was told I couldn't go into that. We called it the jug room. And that was the secret, you know, that's where you made your jug yeast. And that was the secret ingredient, you know, to making your whiskey. And I wasn't allowed to go in there because I was a female. But that was 1990, early 90s. But the cool thing about it is when I left Beam, the last couple of 3 years I was there, I was the senior person in the distillery operation. So I got to make that jug yeast. That was my baby the last couple of years I was there. And so I took a lot of pride and was quiet again about it because it was just a personal thing for me, you know. Mm-hmm. So times have changed, though. Slowly but surely, man, we're getting there.
Well, I'm sure it's still not super easy, but it's good to see a big explosion coming out. And I've always thought, like, it's no secret I'm the only single guy here on the podcast. I've always thought women are better at stuff like this because they're very particular about what they're getting out of things. Yeah. So.
And I agree with you on that because that was one of the things I think that made, you know, the ladies that I've had the opportunity to work with, I think that's what's made them special, is that they are very detailed oriented. They're very organized, you know, and all those things are crucial. It's not that there's not guys that aren't that way. There are, but you know, there's a lot of ladies out there too. I mean, good grief, Lisa Wicker and Becky Harris over there in Virginia, and oh my God, I mean, there's you know, there's a lot of ladies out there right now that are really doing some great stuff with whiskey right now. Yeah, they're just.
Yeah, it always seemed like an old boys club for the longest time, and it seems like things are finally starting to change. And obviously, whiskey keeps getting better and better every year.
Yeah.
So
it's getting better and more interesting.
Yeah, the craft side helped that. I think the craft movement really made a lot of changes in a lot of different ways. It you know, it showed the big legacy brands that they had to do something a little bit different, look outside the box instead of doing the same thing they've been doing for 150 years. The craft folks showed them that way, and it's you know, it's with the women in the business too. You see a lot of it on the craft side.
Well, even the craft side, too, kind of got rid of the, everything's got to be secret. We're not going to tell you. This is just what the whiskey is. Yeah. Like, we're all big fans of the openness now that there is, especially on the craft side of, here's exactly what you're getting. Here's what this is. Here's what this is. Here's where this is from. It's not just, hey, here's one of our mash bills that you're going to get in this bottle of whiskey.
I know, sure. You know, that's a great point because, you know, when we started working there with the distillery in Bardstown, one of the Beam guys, you know, I'm still, you know, stay in contact with several of them, but one of them contacted me and I was telling him about, you know, coming to Bardstown to do a production run. And he's like, what are you talking about? You gave them your mash bill and they know what your yeast strain is and, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you know, and he's like, but, you know, aren't you afraid to give those secrets away? And I'm like, you know, I see where he's coming from, but the thing of it is nobody can take that mash bill and those yeast strains and run them through a still like we can, especially a pot still, because we're the ones that determines where those cuts are made. So it's our taste profile that, you know, nobody else can do that. So they might come close, but, you know, they're not going to mimic exactly what we're doing.
It's funny because a lot of people don't realize how much change can happen from just cut points from your heads and your tails cuts.
Right.
From you talked about using different barrels and different char. Like all this stuff changes so much. You can give someone the flat out recipe. Here's how much we use for poundage of grain. Here's what we're using for grams of yeast. Figure out and try and make it the same, and good luck.
No,
yeah,
let alone
matching the water
somebody
source
trying to
too.
mimic in Kentucky what you're doing in Texas, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I've never understood why everything has to be such a secret, because you could do it 5 miles down the road, it's still going to come out different.
Yeah. That's one thing we've always been very proud about, and it's who we've always been. We haven't changed one bit who we are and how we do things. When it comes to like blending and batching and distilling, we've got MGP rye that we use, and we've got some Tennessee whiskey, we've got Kentucky whiskey, we've got our Texas, and we've always went that route. As long as we have been Milam Greene. We started off as Ben Milam the first year and a half, 2 years, transitioned then into Milam Greene then, and it was basically just a name change, but we've pretty much been very proud of who we are, and how we do things.
I think that was one of the things that stood out to me at the masterclass too, because I remember asking, are you guys going to stop sourcing and switch over to just 100% your own distillate? And I believe you said something along the lines of like, this is how we've been doing it. We're winning a lot of awards. People like our whiskey.
Yeah.
So we're just going to continue sourcing, and we're going to be open about it. And we're going to do some things on the side with our own pot still whiskey that we're distilling down here in Texas, but we're not going to change, how we scale and grow and do our blends.
Right.
And I mean, the whiskey speaks for itself.
Yeah. You know what? We use our Texas whiskey and our Kentucky whiskey in several of our blends, like our triple cast, our provisions bourbon, our unabridged. All those labels are a combination of those two whiskeys, pot stilled and column still. Now there's different ages, that are involved in those blends, and on the unabridged there's a little bit of Tennessee and some different Kentucky whiskey that's thrown in there, but I tell you, it's a special environment down here to age your whiskey in, and we don't try to control any of it. We just try to stay on top of it and keep an eye on it and not let it go too far. And we just work with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I would like to point out as well is me tasting your whiskey, I would never be able to guess where this was distilled. It doesn't taste like Texas bourbon when you think of that bold, punchier oak. It doesn't taste like Tennessee, where a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I can taste the Tennessee whiskey in there." You don't get any of that in here. It's kind of like a beautiful marriage of all these different places. So you guys do a great job blending.
Well, thank you.
Marrying these different distillates together.
And that's not an easy task when you've got, you've got 5 or 6 different aged whiskeys, different proofs. The mash bills might vary just a little bit, the ones that are outside of what we've made. But to take all those different ages, and then to know too that each barrel might be just a little bit different, and then to be able to pull those together, and do the blends that we do, it's a whole different form of art to be able to do that. It's not easy. And then you got to go with inventory. You got to look and see what you've got available in inventory, to even work with. So that's a whole different, animal that it's throwing in there that you got to deal with.
And that had to be a big shock for you when you went from a place as large as Beam, where inventory issues aren't a problem, where you go to a small craft distillery where you might have eight barrels from the same basically batch, and that's about all you have to work with.
Yeah. It makes a big difference. I know the first, it was the second summer I was here, they wanted me to put a real light blend together of a couple of barrels for Derby Day. And so, I had never done anything like that. And so it took me, even though I had a very small inventory to work with. I mean, hell, I think at that time I might have only had like 30 or 40 barrels to even work with. There wasn't that big of an age difference in some of them. And it took me like all month to be able to say that, hey, these are the 2 or 3 barrels that I think are really special for different reasons. And, hell, I'd go down in the morning, I'd pull samples, and and I'd taste, and I was like, oh God, I've got to go back and eyeball the pot still or do something. And, but yeah, it's not an easy thing to do.
No.
So I think we should probably talk about the whiskey itself a little bit. Jake, I don't know, are you drinking the same ones that I am?
So I'm drinking the Bottled and Bond, the triple cask bourbon, and the port finish rye whiskey, which is going to be my dessert pour.
Nice.
But I have the unabridged volume 3 instead of the triple cask. Okay. But I started with the 4-year Bottled and Bond. Like, the first thing that I noticed was how, like, warm and, like, baking spice, like, up front. And then,
but it's not like a punch you spice. No, it's
very
calm,
like
rounded.
Yeah, very nice spice. And like mellow. Very vanilla forward, and like definitely not that like harsh aged oak, that a lot of people think of.
It's like the flavor of the baking spice without the punchy spice.
Yeah, right.
And that's the Bottled and Bond you say that you've got?
Yeah.
So now that is our Kentucky juice. But now it finishes out, the aging. We age it here in Texas. But now there again, it's that malted rye and that sweet mash. And there's something pretty special about it.
It's very, very sweet, and that definitely helps like round out all those flavors.
Yeah,
really
that
well.
should be about a little over 5 years old. That Bottled and Bond should be about 5 years, 4 months. Something, around that age period.
Nice. And the unabridged volume 3 was a very similar kind of flavor profile to me. Just a little bit more bold with the extra proof, I think, on it.
Yeah.
Another excellent whiskey.
And that's like a fairly complex blend that you guys put together once a year.
It is, yes. That is once a year. Generally, we come out with that in September, in time for the holidays. And but that one's generally 6 different aged whiskeys. Now, the one that we've got going now will be volume 5. That's actually got 7 different aged whiskeys in it. But yeah, they all, I was so excited when we come out with volume 1 because it's my favorite. I just love cask strength bourbon. I do. I just love it. And when we come out with number 1, I was like, holy cow, this is great. How are we going to beat this? How are we going to make the next one better than this one? But they've gotten better each time. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that our whiskey is getting more age on it. So, that younger 2.5, 3-year-old that we used to use in it is now up around that 5, 6, 7-year-old mark. So, and that, all that makes a big difference.
Mason, what's the triple cask?
And I was just going to say really quick before we move on, you guys are so transparent about the unabridged, and you go on your website and it tells you the exact breakdown of each percentage, where the whiskey's from. So if you're interested in those, check it out. Gold Eagle has volume 3, 5 bottles left.
Yeah. Well, by doing that, being transparent like that, I think it adds a little more to the experience that the person who's enjoying the whiskey, that they know a little bit more about it, the background of what they're buying in that bottle and what they're drinking, what they're tasting. So, that's a part of it too, is to, making it an experience out of it when you buy a bottle, to have a really cool experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nerds like us love that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could join in on this, but I'm surrounded by people that don't drink alcohol, and I don't get a lot of good whiskey in my state.
Well, we'll just drink a little extra for you.
That's fair. Yeah. That's fair.
Right? I've got single barrel. Is what I've got. I've got all the bottles open in my cabinet, but it's just the one I had sitting on top of the cabinet from last night, having a little sip. So that's what I decided to touch on again today.
But I mean, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about too. Is like the single barrel is actually one of like maybe the first like 20 bottles of whiskey I ever bought. It's super cool that like you've had a single barrel skew for like almost the whole time you've been a distillery, right?
Yeah, we have. Yes, and that was an original skew. Was our single barrel. Actually, Rick Monroe, he was our head distiller at the time. He entered that single barrel into a competition. Now this would have been late 2017, early 2018, right before I come on board, and it won a double gold right out of the gate. I mean, and so, we already had really high standards. Marcia's like, we're not going to settle for okay. We're going to be the best, at making whiskey here in Texas. And then when we got that double gold, that even kicked it up, to even a higher bar than we already had. So, but yeah, that was one of our original skews that we had, and it's fabulous. I mean, it's great. I love to sip on it.
Yeah, I mean, and Jake can say some more about this, but like, not there's so many brands that don't offer anything like a single cask, so it's good to see a distillery or a craft distillery even doing that.
I always think people are fans of distilleries, right? And you walk into a store, and if you're a Milam Greene fan, you know what all the whiskeys taste like, but that single barrel is just going to taste a little bit different every time. So it kind of gives that fan something to look forward to and something new to try. So I'm a huge advocate for single barrels. We're all a huge advocate for single barrels on here. So yeah, I think it's very cool to constantly have something rotating that you're going to like, but is going to be a little bit different.
Right. And, we've tweaked this one. Now, this originally started out as some sourced whiskey that we were getting from Tennessee. And hell, I'll just say it was some Dickel whiskey that we bought originally. That's what that single barrel was. But now this single barrel we've transitioned into this probably a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now. Is our whiskey. It is our mash bill. It's that sweet mash. It's got that malted barley, but it's coming as what we make up in Kentucky, just simply because our inventory that we have from producing up there is way bigger than what our production is, coming out of our pot stills. But yeah, so that's and then we raised the proof on it. It was originally 86 proof, and it just seemed like people would occasionally say, I really like this single barrel, but boy, it'd be nice if it was a little higher proof. Be nice if it was really higher proof. So we tried it. We tried a few batches of it, or a few barrels of it at proofing, adding the water at 94, and it was really good at that level for that proof. So we changed that about a year and a half ago as well. So yeah, it's at 94 proof now.
Nice. Yeah.
All right, Marlene, I have one big question to ask you here. So when I come down to Texas next time to visit our friend Roberto, is the Buggy Barn Museum worth stopping at?
The Buggy Barn's cool. That guy has a collection over there that is just endless. And the neat thing about, as a matter of fact, I just talked to that dude this afternoon. He's a great neighbor. He's the cat that moved in when we got our cooker. We got a 1,000-gallon cooker. Okay. So when they dropped it, when they moved it off the truck, the next thing was like, oh, how are we going to get it inside the building? So, knowing the guy at the buggy barn, Dennis Moore is his name, I thought, I've not seen many things that Dennis can't do. So I called him and I told him what I had going on. He said, well, let me come look at it. And he comes up, he walks in the distillery, and we've got it sitting out back, and we just need to bring it through the bay doors and put it in its resting location. And he said, yeah, I can do that. And I said, well, how are you going to do it? He said, you don't worry about that. He said, you go on back. And I was like, holy cow, and I was a nervous wreck. And so, but anyway, that dude got that moved in, and it was very tight quarters. I'm telling you, to get that through into the distillery and inside. But he can do that. But back on the buggy barn, yeah, there's a huge selection of old buggies over there. As a matter of fact, Dennis travels all over the country and takes that equipment when they're filming Western movies.
Really?
Oh, wow. So some of Yellowstone, if any of you guys are Yellowstone fans, some of those old buggies and those wagons might have been what you could possibly see there at the buggy barn.
I was looking at the Google Maps and I saw it and I'm like, I got to ask about the buggy barn.
He's our neighbor. They have axe throwing competitions over there, so there's no telling what you might run into.
Guys, do you have any other questions for Marlene?
I guess my final question would be, it seems like you guys are always innovating. The Provisions Bourbon was your latest release, and that was a huge hit at our masterclass. It's a $32.99 price point for a 5-year Kentucky bourbon, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that's Texas and Kentucky.
Texas and Kentucky. Sorry,
that's Texas and Kentucky. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, again, that was a huge hit, and I believe you said that's quickly becoming, one of your best-selling bourbons. Yeah. Is there anything that you guys are working on that you can hint at or talk about that people can look forward to?
Yeah. So we've got, we do a wildlife series. And so every quarter we come out with a wildlife series. Last year it was animals. We had like the Guadalupe bass. We had the roadrunner, the rattlesnake. Those were some of the releases that we've done the last couple of years. Actually, this year we're doing like the florals of Texas. So the one that's coming out, actually, we're going to release it this Saturday here at the distillery, is live oak. And it is really nice. We were letting people sip on that one a little bit at the Texas Whiskey Festival. We took a couple of bottles of it, and so what that is, guys, is that is our again, it is our Kentucky whiskey that aged about 2 years, maybe 3 years there in Kentucky, and then it's been sitting in our rick house now for almost 4 years. So this is right at a 7-year-old whiskey. I think it's kicking in proof-wise like at a 123, and it is fabulous. It is really nice. So we'll continue with that with our wildlife releases that we do. We've got Volume 5 of Unabridged that will be out later this year in time for the holidays. We've got a pretty cool climate. Another little climate experiment. We did the one called The Answer, where we had the 2 375 bottles that was aged in 2 different locations, 1,100 miles apart. That was pretty cool. So we've got another one that we're currently working on. So, those are just a few things. And you never know. I mean, there's a few more things we're working on discussing, but the Provisions, we love it. We had the high proof whiskey, the unabridged coming in at cask strength. We had our very small batch that's 108 proof. And then the Wildlife series are all cask strength. So we wanted to offer something on the other end of the spectrum. And we were missing, a whole group of consumers there, people that like a little lighter taste when it comes to alcohol. And man, I tell you, the Provisions has been a huge hit. I mean, it really has. It's been pretty special for us.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Marlene, so people are down San Antonio, anywhere in central southern Texas, swing by the distillery. What else? Got a minute here? Where can they buy online through you guys?
Yeah, they can buy online. It actually goes through a third party. But yeah, go to our website, and we've got a lot of bundles that we offer. If you order so much dollar-wise, you get free shipping. But come to the distillery. It's a special place here in Hill Country outside of San Antonio, and we've got a tasting room. Generally every Saturday we've got live music, nice big oak tree out front. So it's just it's a pretty cool place to come and hang out and just listen to some good music and have some great cocktails.
When I was down there in Hill Country last time, the one thing I learned is if you know Hill Country, you got to go to Fredericksburg because everyone knows about Fredericksburg.
Right, absolutely. And we're on that path. Yeah. So if you come down and you go to Fredericksburg, you got to stop and visit us because we're on that route.
Our friend Roberto was telling me that he couldn't believe that I didn't know about Fredericksburg, and I'm like, I don't know much about Texas. And all I remember about Fredericksburg was one of the stores there gave out free beer.
Right? Yeah. At Fredericksburg, again, that's a very cool city, little town, too. I mean, it's much bigger than Blanco, but all of these towns around this central part here in Hill Country have a lot of personality about them. Yeah. I've enjoyed it. I've had the best time. I've had 8 years of just, I've put a lot of miles on my car because no place is close.
No.
But, It's been great.
Awesome. Jake, you teased a coupon code earlier.
I did.
Are we going to move some Milam Greene after this episode?
We are. So the coupon code is going to be BM Marlene, because Marlene joined us on this episode. So BMMARLENE will get you 10% off any Milam Greene product at Gold Eagle. You can do so at goldeaglewine.com. Download our app on the Apple App Store, Google Play Store. Use that code for 10% off pickup. We ship to 40 states, so if we're not one of the states that you can find Milam Greene in, or through a third party, please order through us. Follow us on Instagram at Gold Eagle Wine. Follow us on Facebook at Gold Eagle Spirits.
Yeah, and highly recommend going to the master classes it's like the one they just had for Milam Greene. You get to learn a lot. You get discount.
One of the best master classes. You could have met Marlene in person.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. That was a good group that night. People were interested. They had great questions, and then the chats we had afterwards. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed my visit there. I'd love to come back sometime.
Next time you're in Chicago, definitely hit us up. We would love to have you back.
Nice.
Thanks for that slap in the face to my masterclass, Jake. Thank you. Make me feel real good about what I did.
And not the best.
Thank you. Jake, if people wanted to hear some of our other podcasts, follow us on social, where can they do that at?
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Bourbon Matters. You can listen to us on Apple, Google, Spotify, pretty much any other podcast platform. Watch us on Spotify and YouTube. And thank you very much, Marlene. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I do. I love this. I love chatting with people about who we are and how we do things and what we do. And, it's been a good business for me, and I've enjoyed a lot of it. Most of it anyway has been pretty cool. So, and be able to chat with you guys, I love it. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. You guys come and see us.
I go back down to San Antonio for Thanksgiving. I'm telling Roberta to take me right there, and I'm not driving. So
cool.
But all right, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers. See you guys. Thanks, you all.